The most thrilling, spine-tingling series ever.
From the pages of R.L. Stine's best-selling books,
And the screams go on forever and ever.
We now return to Goosebumps.
Greetings, Goosebumps fans, young and old, big and small, living dead and undead. Welcome back to the Goosebumps Crew Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Isaiah Vargas, and I'm joined by my good buddies Bjorn Palanick and Nick Shaw. We are the Goosebumps Crew, and we're back to talk some Goosebumps. So this is your first time joining us here on the Goosebumps Crew Podcast. I want to welcome you sincerely. If you are or have ever been a fan of the Goosebumps series of books or the franchise around it, then I have a feeling that this podcast is going to be right up your alley. I always say that me, Bjorn, and Nick are three of the biggest Goosebumps nerds on the entire planet. We could talk about Goosebumps for hours on end, and that's exactly what we do here on this podcast. Every week we have a brand new episode where we talk about everything Goosebumps, from the books, TV shows, movies, video games, merchandise, whatever it is. If it has Goosebumps on the product, we're probably going to talk about it till we're 178. So if you end up liking today's episode, make sure you leave a like and comment down below. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you not only check out the other episodes of the Goosebumps Crew Podcast, but make sure that you subscribe and hit the bell notification so that when new episodes drop, you'll get a nice little notification. If you want to hear episodes a day before they go up on YouTube, you can follow the Goosebumps Crew on audio platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and iHeartRadio. Episodes go up a day early over on those platforms. And of course, if you want to just keep up with the Goosebumps Crew Podcast, see what we're up to, have a chat with us, you can follow the Goosebumps Crew over on social media, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and Facebook. You can also follow Bjorn and Nick at Goosebumps Aussie Fan and Shaolin, respectively, on their YouTubes and social medias. All those links are in the description below, so go check them out. We thank you in advance for your support. Join the Goosebumps crew member, become a crew member today. We appreciate your support. All right, so it's been a little while since we did an episode retrospective. I believe the last time that we did one was when we had Catherine Long on for episode 23. We talked about the Haunted Mask. So we're going to reel it on back, and we're going to talk about another classic Goosebumps episode. Joining us today to talk about the episode that we will be talking about is Charlotte Sullivan. You may have seen her in shows like Chicago Fire, Law and Order, Rookie Blue, but she was also in an episode of Goosebumps as the show-offish, brave, and a little bit snooty young girl, Courtney King. So Charlotte, thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to the Goosebumps Crew.
Oh, a lovely introduction. I'm just also realizing I've played so many Courtneys that I didn't remember the character's name on this one, but you just reminded me. I don't know what it is, but people think I look like a Courtney.
You kind of do. I will give them that. But we're very happy to have you on. And today's episode of interest is the episode You Can't Scare Me. This is episode 7 of season 2. Original air date October 5th, 1996. It was directed by, I'm not going to butcher this name, Renee Bonnier, and written by Peter Mitchell. And it is, of course, based on the 15th book of the original series of the same name. And for a quick refresher for anyone who's not seen this episode is about two boys, Hat and Eddie, and there's a girl in school named Courtney. She is super show-offish about how brave she is, how unafraid she is of anything. She's always talking about it, and it drives Hat and Eddie nuts. They cannot stand it. And one day, after many attempts, they try to scare her, all failed. Well, one day they decide to go to the ultimate extreme and they decide to take her to Muddy Creek, where there is apparently a legend about a mud monster, and they're going to use that mud monster to scare her. But unfortunately, they end up finding out that the legend is real and that they are in very real danger. Now, before we get into the specifics of the episode, Charlotte, I just want to ask you, how did you get involved with being on Goosebumps?
I would imagine that I just would have like auditioned for it. I don't have any recollection of that because I'm senile, but that would be the only. I would certainly have. I would have had to have auditioned for sure.
And it makes a lot of sense. Many past episodes of the Goosebumps crew, we've talked with other actors, and to be incredibly fair, a lot of people can't remember the process, and some people even said it just came down to just I walked in, I got the role, that was it.
Oh God, they're liars. They're such liars.
Well, anyone who's familiar with auditioning knows it's not that easy. I mean, you have to be knock your socks off good for that simple of a process.
As we were saying before, the pool was small and they had no choice.
That is also very true.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
Nope, all good. Bjorn, you had something to say?
Oh no. Well, some even said that they just got like approached if they wanted to do it, and I believe it was Kyrick Erickson, that he was approached to do an episode. He didn't really want to do it. It was only like a short one, and then he got approached for a 2-part episode, and he was like, "Okay, I'll do that." So yeah, I guess some of the actors from the show even just was like, "Hey, do you want to do this?" So yeah,
I did not have that luxury, so I had to work.
had to work for that role.
Yeah.
Did you have any acting roles before you got involved with Goosebumps, or was this your first?
Yeah, I was still in school, so I remember I had, I wasn't not allowed to do this regularly. Like I had to do specifically, like tried to do it during like summer break. My mom was definitely worried about school. But I can't remember when we shot this, but oh my gosh, I would have done maybe a couple movies before this, I think. Yeah, I think so.
Very nice. So you had some experience going into Goosebumps. There have been some people who this was their first ever role, including one Ryan Gosling. That's always the best trivia, is that Ryan Gosling's first role was in Goosebumps, of all things.
Have you got him on the podcast yet?
We have certainly tried, but we have been told by his team that he unfortunately doesn't do fan projects. So, but we'll get him someday. We'll get him.
Hey,
we will get him.
We will get him.
I was gonna say, I know you've done some things before Goosebumps because you were also in Harriet the Spy.
That was my first movie ever.
But I think that actually came out before your episode of Goosebumps.
No, that would have been like my very first time on set ever. So that's where I was exceptionally green. Not that I was at all a veteran for the Goosebumps, but I was. Yeah, I had no idea what marks were. I didn't, just learning. So I was only like 11 years old.
It was a whole new world. I can imagine, that's an entirely different environment to be in, especially as a kid. So, totally understandable. When you got, when you got the role to be in this particular episode, were you familiar with Goosebumps at all, or was this like a completely foreign franchise to you?
No, I remember the books. I probably would have lied and said I read them. But I remember having them, but I don't think that they pulled at my heartstrings. I'm not sure if I actually read them, but I probably would have lied to probably get the role saying I read them all for sure.
Well, to be incredibly fair, I would think a lot of people would say the Goosebumps books are remembered more for the covers, and as we say for this the book that this episode's based on, this is a cover that is super memorable. The story is okay, but this is a cover that I can have vividly in my head forever. Mud Monsters, one of my personal favorites.
You're not
You're
just
on the
saying
cover
that.
of one of the books.
No, it's
Yeah,
always
you are
been.
on the cover of the TV Presents book.
Yep, there is a TV Presents book that is based on the episode.
Take it out of the thing, you can see it a bit clearer, but yeah, it's on the TV Presents book.
Oh, what? And my mouth is kind of like this. What am I doing? What?
It looks like you're mid-speech.
Probably caught you mid-sentence.
You're literally, you're mid-speech, like talking the boys' ears off pretty much in this scene.
Right. Okay.
But,
They could have maybe chosen a better shot, but that's fine.
Well, we're definitely going to get to talk about that part of the episode because that's probably the funniest part of the episode. I will say that You Can't Scare Me is not one of my particularly remembered episodes of the TV show, but I will say it does two things. Number one, it's one of the more humorous episodes of the Goosebumps show. There's definitely a lot of, I wouldn't say there's a lot of jokes, but there's a little more of the sort of womp womp sort of humor. For instance, you have two main characters who, almost like a Wile E. Coyote scenario, tried to scare Courtney, who, as I said, is someone who's very brave, but is also very show offish. They're like, look at how brave I am. Look at how much I'm not scared of anything. Intentional or not, it certainly comes off that way to the two main characters. But you have sort of this scenario where they're like, okay, we're going to scare her really good. We're going to like really scare her just to show everyone else that she's not as brave as she says. And the first thing they do, they try to sneak a snake into her lunch bag. It scares the teacher, but she's like holding in, being like, here, do you want to pet it? And he's like, no. And then they try to scare her with a tarantula, and they end up getting locked in a closet with the tarantula on them, and she has to come save them. And then finally, the aforementioned Muddy Creek they try to go to. That's like their ultimate scare. But they're the ones who end up getting scared for real. So you have this scenario where these main characters are pulling, as I said, a Wile E. Coyote scenario where they're like, here's the next scheme on getting our goal, and then it backfires and they're back to square one again. So there's a lot of humor in that setup. But for me personally, this is also an episode that scared the daylights out of me as a kid. I vividly remember this episode's imagery for really being creepy. The woods are always a creepy setting for a scary story. And no matter what it is, being lost in the woods with a monster on the loose is always going to be a very creepy setup for a horror story. Especially with a mud monster where you're in a forest of, where there's mud everywhere. Now, mud monsters, they can be anywhere. They could be like right underneath you. And I guess we could start at the beginning. The opening of this episode starts off with it's a story that Courtney is telling to the class about a little girl and her grandpa that are walking through the woods, and they're like, they're having fun, and they're being like, oh, don't go too far. It's like, oh, I want to have fun. I remember that line. It's like, I just want to have fun. And she's like throwing her ball around, and the ball gets stuck in some mud, like a big mud pool. And the grandpa's like, well, hold on, let me get it. And he reaches in, he tries to grab it, and then a hand comes out and pulls him inside. And then out comes the mud monster. It's like, roar. And it was terrifying as a kid. It's like not only somebody getting pulled under by something you do, it was like, what is it? And then out comes this thing. It looks like a person, but it's not. And then it's just like roaring and rumbling towards you. And that's how.
Oh no! If you're gonna do the roar, you do it like how you did it. Roar. Like how you did. There you go.
It's not like that.
It's terrifying. It's so scary.
Yeah, I would say it's a lot less terrifying than what I just did. So, to all the people watching this who have soiled themselves, I am not sorry.
I see Isaiah coming through going. I don't know.
I wouldn't be terrified. Look, just to set the record straight, I wouldn't want to run into me at night. So, no, that's how the episode starts. This is an interesting episode because the supernatural aspect of it, most Goosebumps episodes, the monster is the forefront. That's the big bad force that the main character has to overcome. Here, it's not really the focus. This episode and the book subsequently is very similar to a book from the Series 2000 series called Are You Terrified Yet? Which is another one that involves characters trying to scare another character. In that book, it's bullies trying to scare a very, very scareable kid who's scared of just about anything. And the whole process is him overcoming that fear. That's an episode that has no supernatural, or that's a book that has no supernatural aspects. Here, there is one, but it's not the forefront. It's saved for the very end. So going back to you, Charlotte. So you play Courtney. She's someone who, while doesn't, she doesn't do anything wrong. She's a perfect student. She writes reports, gets good grades, and she's completely unafraid. Like nothing scares her at all. And we'll talk about how actually that differs a little bit from the book in sort of a humorous way. But what was sort of what was the process of playing this character? Was it a character that was easy to play? What's kind of the scoop?
Was she easy to play? I think I probably struggled a lot with the dialogue, I would say. I think if I had to talk a lot, I was always really intimidated to have copious amounts of dialogue. That was one of my biggest problems and biggest stress as a kid with work. So I would imagine that would have been something I was stressing out about quite a bit, because I think I did have to talk a lot. And the boys, I don't think they didn't have nearly as much as I did. And so, but I do remember playing with a snake, which was actually really cool. And I remember the actor who I was working with in that scene, he was so lovely, and everything was just really, I remember it being really relaxed and chill. And I think everybody was really into that snake because it was just, I think it was just a corn snake. So they're not venomous at all. They're quite lovely and my daughter is obsessed with them. So I do gravitate towards the snake. So that was fine. I remember I had to pick up a tarantula, and they had a person on standby to be my arm, to do it. And so I think they did a couple takes with somebody else's finger, underneath my arm. But then I remember I did it in one take as well. That was, I think probably the more nerve-wracking one, but it was also quite docile once you learn that these things are really very shy. And really, you are the main predator in the situation. I think those are, I honestly don't, I remember the mud. I remember that getting all over the place. These are the things that are coming back to this old brain. The mud, I remember Clueless had just come out. So I think a lot of my costumes were inspired by that movie was everything, but I think a lot of the character outfits were heavily inspired by Alicia Silverstone's character.
It certainly seemed like that.
Yeah, I think all those little fuzzy pens and everything, and I would imagine I probably stole a couple of those too, or tried to get some stuff. But I'm not helping you. What else do you want to know? I'll try my best to answer. What else
all good. I'm okay. Going back to what you said about the amount of dialogue. Courtney is someone who talks a lot in this episode. Mm-hmm. Definitely to sort of hammer home why the two boys are really annoyed with her. Because again, there's people who do that sort of thing. They know a lot, but maybe they say too much. You know what I mean? And Courtney's somebody who definitely, when she gets on her high horse, she talks a lot. When she's giving her report, she's talking about I want to thank you, the teacher. I want to thank you because writing this report really gave me the aspirations to overcome my own fears. It's somebody who talks very highly of themselves, sort of like a holier than thou. sort of personality. But again, it's more so you're in the shoes of the two boys, so you got to make the character, you got to make the audience sympathize with them and their goal. But at the same time, it's like it's annoying, but like she's not doing anything wrong per se. She's just look, if she's unafraid of anything, that's fine. There's a lot of people are unafraid of things. But again, it's that Wile E. Coyote thing is like, I'm gonna do this because, in obviously not the same circumstances, but like we have a goal. We want to attain that goal no matter like how pointless the outcome really is going to be, or how much we get embarrassed in the process. And that's sort of where the humor comes in from. That was actually going to be one of my questions, is if you had to handle a real snake and a real tarantula. I'll start with the tarantula first because
that was my question too.
When we talked with Eugene Lipinski, who is in The Girl Who Cried Monster, that was another episode that had a character picking up a tarantula. Fortunately, in this episode, no one eats the tarantula. But he told us that there was a process where they had to sort of spray this, like what he called an invisible glove, on someone's hand, because there are some tarantulas that their hair, I don't know what he said. He said that their hair can get like stuck in your skin and can cause some pain. Was that a similar scenario, or was this one where it was not as?
Maybe I would say maybe they were not privy to that information before we did. And they're just like, let her fucking pick it up. And so had we have known, had we been more schooled, I don't know. I do remember there was a lot of like anticipation and fear around it, but then once you spoke to the handler, it was like, you really just kind of got a little bit more comfortable with it. I don't remember being sprayed. I think they left me to the wolves. I don't think they protected it. I certainly don't feel protected in that one.
Well, fortunately, since there's no memory of, problems with your hand afterward, I would say that maybe things went a little better than expected.
Maybe, yeah.
The hairs can get pretty like agitating, because I have a pet tarantula, but I'm not allowed to keep it here. It lives at my mother's place because my partner hates spiders, but I love tarantulas. So I have a beautiful tarantula. I named her Charlotte, and
thank you.
Yeah. Like Charlotte's Web. So I just thought, how ironic.
I get it.
But yeah, no. So she's beautiful though. Like mine is very. So how I got her is I have a friend who, he is like a spider tame. Like he has heaps of tarantulas, and he even said Charlotte is probably the most like well-natured, nice-natured tarantula he's ever handled. Like, there is not one bad bone in her entire body. Like, you can pick her up and she'll just crawl on you. And like, sometimes they might put their legs up if they're like, leave me alone. Like, or they'll kick the hairs at you, but she's just like, she's so calm. And I just let her crawl all over me. I mean, I know the hairs aren't particularly, like we were talking about, good to get on your skin, but and that's why sometimes I feel like if I put a shirt on, I get a bit like scratchy, and I'm like, is some of her hair like in my shirt or something? But I love tarantulas. I think they're very misunderstood creatures.
And my daughter wants one so badly, and she's been angling one for a long time. And then she got to meet one that was quite aggressive, and she was still really into it. So even though that one she wasn't allowed to handle it, that's like number one after she wants a scorpion. Like, I mean, I've had to conquer a lot of fears, okay, because I don't want her to see the fear, because I feel like fear gets transferred. But it's particularly with this, bringing it back to this episode, I remember there's an anticipation of feeling like scared to touch something and then getting there and realizing it was not that big of a deal and it was fine.
Well, the contrast too between, because the whole scene is that they're like, well, we're going to use this tarantula to scare her, but it ends up being that she's not scared at all of the tarantula, but they are, and it's crawling on them. And there's this whole scene because they're in a closet, they're trying not to get caught, and it's crawling on Eddie, and Hat has to like put his mouth over him so he doesn't scream. And it's just crawling up and up, and they're just like getting more jittered, and finally they're just like, help, let us out, let us out, let us out. And then she goes in, it's just like, tarantulas are not as, deadly as you may think they are. She picks up as like, they're actually, it's funny because hearing you both, talk about how like, hearing you both talk about how harmless they are and how like sweet and kind they are is exactly what she said in the episode. So it's just like, that's exactly what's said in the episode. It's just like, they're very nice and they're very I think they even said they're very misunderstood creatures.
Oh God. Okay. So what you're trying to say is I'm the character until 30
in some ways. But it's just funny. But it's also,
and your daughter seems to be inheriting some of that too.
Totally. I'm like, I didn't even realize how
and...
meta this conversation is.
I know. It's like they said, art imitates real life.
Yeah, no, it's all coming to fruition right now. I'm having the biggest epiphany ever.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's also very true. Now, look, I'm one to say something because I also have fears that I will probably never overcome because I'm too afraid of them. But there are people out there who...
Isaiah?
What was that?
Is it tarantulas, Isaiah?
It is not tarantulas. It's not snakes. And I'm not going to say what it is because I don't want you guys to torture me with it. But it's very true. There are people who can overcome their fears. You will never find out.
I think I might know what it is. Is it like if all your Goosebumps stuff was on fire? I mean, that would be my
I'm not afraid of that, but I certainly wouldn't like it. I'd probably be more angry than scared. But it's very true. I mean, when you overcome your fears, I don't know what I'm trying to say here.
To me, it's a sense of freedom.
It is a sense of freedom. That is quite a way to say it, because your fears sort of like hold you down. And for some people, there are lots of fears that people have. Some of them can be very trivial, like tarantulas and snakes and stuff like that. But, some people have like much greater fears. Some people have fears that, lead to things like depression or stuff like that, like fear of relationships, fear of, connecting, of bonding. Not to get, I don't mean to get super deep on here, but there's
actually, and it's crazy how many fears there. I mean, I feel like there's a fear for everything, but I especially remember like when I was a kid and I was sick staying home. I don't know what show it was, but there was a whole show about people's odd fears, and there's like people who are afraid of the color yellow, people who are afraid of olives, and all this. It was so strange. It's like, where do these fears like?
There was a clip on Maury, I believe, Maury of all things, or it was Maury, or it was
yes, that's what it was.
Was it?
Yeah,
okay,
no, that's what it was.
So there was a clip I saw on Instagram, and it was somebody who was so deathly afraid of pickles, like so afraid that she's crying at the thought of pickles, and then they bring pickles out and she's just like like she's running away, like screaming.
No, that was the olive lady. That was the olive one.
Was it the? I'm so sure it was pickles. They were the editors were so unkind too, because she's crying about pickles, and then they're playing like slow motion clips of like pickles falling and like juice splashing everywhere. It's like, it's so mean, but it's really funny.
It was mean, but it was funny at the same time.
But that's the thing too. It's like, we can laugh at probably what they fears, but people have legitimate fears, and it can eat people up inside. So honestly, the fact that anyone could be unafraid is not only like a rare commodity, because everybody's afraid of something. Like everybody's afraid of at least one thing, even if it's big, if it's super small, everyone has a fear. But it's you overcome that fear that you learn more about yourself and you have a sense of freedom. You know, you've overcome it. You've shown that you are bigger than it. So that's us getting deep into this episode.
Can I know the fears that you've overcome? I'm curious to know what that would be.
Well, I'm gonna get really deep. We're gonna go deeper.
Okay.
I actually had a fear for a long time, and maybe this is a little too personal, but I actually had a fear for a long time about being honest about my Asperger's. Now, I have Asperger's, and for a long time I was super ashamed. I was super ashamed because I thought that it made me feel inferior. I always felt myself as an outcast because I didn't really have many friends. I didn't get really social in school growing up, and I felt very alone at times. But I was always afraid to like be open about like what is it about me that like is different. And I was always told, you know, it's your Asperger. That's why you're like this. That's why you are. I was hyperactive for a long time. That they say it's because you're Asperger's. And I was always so nervous about telling anybody because I'm like, I don't want people to think I'm like, you know, different than them. I want to be like someone who is normal. But after a while, I was just like, I really need to be honest about this. Like I don't remember what brought it on, but one day I went to my teacher. I'm like I need to like say something, and they're like, you should tell everyone. So she called on me, and it was a super big moment. I remember my heart was racing as fast as like one of the biggest nervous points of my life. They're like, Isaiah has something he needs to tell everyone. And I stood up, and I was super, super nervous, but I just said, well, I just want to say I have Asperger's. That's why I'm like this. That's why it's harder for me to sort of really be open, and sort of affects my behavior sometimes. It was a super big moment. It really was. But that day I overcame that fear, and now I can say that with no shame. I'm not ashamed of it anymore. That's a really big thing.
Beautiful. I love it's so interesting how something could be. I at least find when I'm scared of something or have like severe anxiety about something, I find just saying it, like even if it's to a stranger, like one of my big things is like when I walk into like, let's say a social gathering, I don't know what to say. I really struggle with that. And I'm like, and I often say the thing that you shouldn't say. And then I beat the shit out of myself later for why did I say that? And it's just this, it's really frustrating. So then I'm like, well, then why even go? Like, what's the point of even going? So I find that when I go to these gatherings, I just say it. I'm like, I have like serious anxiety right now, like the worst. And then someone else will say, oh yeah, me too. And then it's like, when you realize that all the hands are going up, then you're like, oh, it's not that big of a deal.
I do too. I'm going to be that person. I'm going to say me too. And that's true for everybody. Anxiety, it's so funny because there's a movie out right now about anxiety. If you haven't seen Inside Out 2, by the way, go watch it.
Oh, I loved Inside Out 2. Oh my
so
God.
Good. That is a movie that I never thought that there would ever be a movie that talks about anxiety so well as that movie. It's crazy. But more to the point, anxiety is everywhere. Like, we talk about fears, but probably the better word for it is definitely anxiety. Everybody has anxiety in their normal lives. When you go to a job interview, you're anxious because you don't want to say something that, comes out the wrong way, or you don't want to make yourself look bad. Or when you're hanging out with friends, like you don't want to, or even meeting new friends, it's like you don't want to say something that's going to make you look like uncool, or make yourself look like a square. That wasn't a square. This is a square.
We're all in a square like right a square.
Now. It's something like that. When you're in the first stages of a relationship, like when you're dating for the first time, you're anxious. You don't want to mess something up. Anxiety is everywhere. It really, really is. And again, we don't mean to get all deep on you guys. This is Goosebumps after all, but it really is true. This is something that.
Well, I don't know. Like we find out after we do like episode breakdowns, there's actually, intentional or not, there seems to be a lot more depth to some of the stories than probably what was originally intended at the time. So we've had quite a few conversations with different guests where we've talked about their episode and they're like, oh man, I never thought about it like that. And, so we start figuring out things kind of like we're doing right now.
Yeah. So, I mean, what you guys are witnessing at home is the epiphany of what this whole episode really means.
But remember, young Isaiah,
with the added bonus of ghoulish mud monsters that want to kill you. So, but going back to the original point of the episode, so when we get to the boys, here's the thing about the two main characters is that as a kid, you can understand where these two characters come from when you have somebody who, again, has sort of that holier than thou aspect to themselves, and it's fine to be unafraid. It's another thing to sort of boast about it. It's like, I'm not scared. I'm not scared. I'm not scared of anything. You can try it. I'm not scared, and I've grown through it. Somebody who is actually modest, can take that in stride and just not be like, I'm better than you because of it, intentional or not. The thing is, you can never know if somebody like means to be like that or if it's all just kind of like a facade, something like that. But where the two boys sort of, you sympathize them with your kid, but to be honest, as an adult, for me personally, I look at these two and I'm like, what are you guys doing? Is this really worth it? Is this really worth your time? It seems like you guys are
jealous
kind of
they're getting all the attention, and that's why they're like, that's how I always saw it when I was a kid. Like I used to think, oh, these two kids, they're jealous of it.
Did you guys hate me? Were you like, oh, I hate her so much?
No,
I mean, look,
it made me laugh, to be honest. Like I used to think your character was like so great, so funny, like and that you played it so well, like. You sold it so well. Like,
well, here's,
you know what I mean? I thought it was, I thought you were actually just like really funny.
Honestly, I was in the back of my head. I'm like, I kind of hope that sort of question doesn't come up. To be incredibly honest, as a kid, you sort of root with the underdog. Let's say that you sort of root with those underdog characters of people who kind of want to be like, I want to prove something. And the way that the episode, certainly the way that the episode and especially the book that are laid out, you're kind of supposed to go in with a sort of like vitriol against that character. The book, especially the way R.L. Stine writes these kind of characters in the book is like tenfold compared to the episodes. I think the episode actually dials down the character quite a bit. But in terms of the episode, I don't find myself hating her as much as just sort of being like, I agree with you. I agree with you that, you grow through overcoming your fears, but it sort of it can make somebody a little, I'm better than you sort of aspect. And again, maybe it's unintentional, but it comes off that way. So, but I more just find myself being like, to the main characters, it's just like, guys, this is really not worth it. I think the first time you embarrass yourselves, you kind of walk away from the whole thing, and it's because of their just want to make her scared. That leads them to almost getting killed by a mud monster. So, no, of course not all scenarios.
Fine line, I guess, between confidence and just
show offishness.
Yeah.
Because
she does exude like a lot of confidence in that episode more than a lot of other things. But then you get those moments where, like we talked about earlier, where she kind of brown nosed on the teacher some, just to get a few brownie points. So
Mhm.
And I mean, it's a little bit of both.
Well, and when you get to sort of like the climax of the episode, the third act, because everything before then is pretty grounded in reality. There's not really much of like the supernatural, as I said before. It's a lot of very realistic scenarios. But then you get to Muddy Creek. Now, they go to her. This is their big attempt. This is their last shot. This is going to get her for sure. And they go to her and they're like, "Hey, if you want to prove that you're not scared of anything, like go to Muddy Creek." And she's like, "Well, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to waste my time." They're like, "Well, maybe you're too scared to do it." And she's like, "No, I'll do it." It's sort of like that, like I have to protect my confidence sort of thing. So it's like, yeah, okay, you're on. And they go there and they're like, "All right, we're going to scare her." My least favorite part of the episode, because I hate getting my clothes dirty at all. So
in that way.
Seeing Hat slather Eddie in this mud all over his clothes is probably the scariest part of the episode to me. Like, dude, that's going to take weeks to get out of your clothes.
Is that your fear? Is that your fear, is dirty clothes?
No.
Oh.
No, my fear is not dirty clothes. You will never find out what it is.
Oh, I will.
Is it just cleanliness? Is it just keeping things clean?
No,
It's a
it's just
Germaphobe, that's it.
I'm not a germaphobe either. You guys won't find out. I feel like I'm Courtney in this scenario. You will not find out.
Germaphobes, man.
You are the two boys.
What if Charlotte asked you what your fear was? Would you tell her no?
Nah, I wouldn't. I probably wouldn't say it.
I can tell you my fear right now.
I said a fear I overcame.
Like 100%. My fear is being in the middle of the ocean. Like in the middle of the ocean, like just bobbing up and down in the water. Not knowing when, like, I'm either going to get eaten by a shark, I'm going to, I don't know, I'm eventually going to starve to death, or like, you know what I mean? That's my fear, the ocean. Like I it's just so vast and like it goes on forever and ever. Like what is it? 5% of the ocean has been explored, and like not knowing what's underneath, like below me. So that what gives me anxiety? The movie Open Water. It gives me anxiety big time. Yeah. I can't watch that movie. I remember like I used to love shark movies as a kid, and I remember that one was coming out, and I really wanted to watch it, and I remember my auntie specifically telling me, "I don't know if you'll like that one, though. It's not like your typical just monster shark movie like Jaws. Like, this is a bit different." And I was like, "Nah, sure, I'll love it." And then, yeah, I should have listened to it, because that really gave me bad anxiety that whole time watching that film. And I remember, like, even just sitting in the theater and just being like, I can't watch anymore. I need to stop. Like, the fear of just being lost in the middle of the ocean. So like even the story of the I think the ship that went down during World War II, was it the I can't even remember what it was called now, but Quint tells the story in Jaws, actually, funny enough. The Indianapolis, that's what it was. And they all ended up in the water, and they were getting eaten by sharks, and they were drinking the salt water, and things like that. I'm just like, man, like that kind of stuff, that is my fear. I can't, you know what I mean? Like that would be the ultimate way to
or even more terrifying is that submarine incident that happened last year.
Oh my gosh.
Being trapped underwater in a pressurized container, and that is a bad way to go right there. Not even the underwater aspect, just being trapped in a
sardine can.
Terrifying. My sister's afraid of butterflies.
And smaller and smaller.
I think a lot of people are afraid of butterflies. I've heard that. That's like more common.
I believe SpongeBob probably traumatized an entire generation.
It was SpongeBob's fault.
Though that actually is not a butterfly that they showed. I don't remember what it was. I think they said it was like a horsefly or something like that. There's an episode of SpongeBob where SpongeBob and Patrick are house sitting for Sandy, and one of her pets is a worm, and the worm goes into, or was it a caterpillar? And caterpillar goes into a cocoon and then comes out as a butterfly, and they're terrified of the butterfly. And there's two parts in the episode where it like gets really close to their face, and then it's a close up of like a housefly, and there's like this horrifying.
It is like, but a lot of shows like that, even for kids, they did tap into a lot of those like fear things, and even in shows like SpongeBob, they did it. The Simpsons did it a lot. But yeah, no, butterflies. It's
and Goosebumps.
I know they're cannibalistic. They eat meat, so if a butterfly was like what the size of a human or even half the size, like
yeah, we all know
we'd probably be on the menu.
Those brain,
you know what I mean? Like, so I think maybe that's what it is. Like the fact that they do eat, other dead insects and stuff. Like they're cannibalistic. That's what I've been told. So
well, they eat insects.
Yeah.
When you say meat eating, I'm not imagining a butterfly going and like chomping a piece of a person off. I'm not.
It might though.
I'm
like, if you
part of my arm. Oh, it was that butterfly. Well, going back to Goosebumps, I mean, you talk about this isn't the only episode that deals with, fear, of course. It's the only episode that really talks about fear as a concept. But every Goosebumps episode has that sort of, overcoming of an obstacle or something like that. And there's a lot of fears. Like I don't know why this episode's popping into my head, but the House of No Return from season 3, just the idea of being trapped in a haunted house. Like you got these kids who are like get in that house. We're going to lock you inside. And it's like, your fight or flight things are going off. You're just like, get me out, I got it here right now. Again, that's it. It's common in everybody. When you're really faced with something scary, you're going to have those instincts of like I said, fight or flight. But going back to the episodes. Okay. So he's slathering this kid in mud. Hate it. But he's like, okay, wait here. She's going to come by. You're going to jump out. You're going to scare her. Then he's like, I'm going to go find more mud. And I'm like, dude, there's mud around you. It's like, why do you got to go into the woods to find mud? And you're going to carry it back? Whatever. But he goes in and then he sees the mud monster and he turns around, and this chase scene, I'm telling you, is terrifying. It's horrifying. Goosebumps always really does chases scary. Like the Werewolf of Fever Swamp had a good one, and this one has a good one. And then he comes back to Eddie and he's like, there's a real monster. And he's like, no, there's not. It's not real. Monsters aren't real. And then Courtney shows up. She's wearing her raincoat. It's all puffy and blue. And then she's like, well, look what we have here.
That's literally
they're
the cover
both standing
of the book.
there. They're just.
First of all, can I just say, I think you did way better acting than I did. Okay. So, thank you.
I don't consider myself an actor, so.
Well, I don't know. You should rethink that.
I appreciate that. But yeah, so she shows up and she's just chastising him right away, just like, here we have. I remember B for B is like, here we have two adolescents who are so consumed with it's those big words again. It's that wordy dialogue. And they're just like defeated. They're just like, oh my God. Long enough to distract them from the fact that there's a big lumbering monster that's walking up behind Courtney. And getting into what I said before, I was going to bring up how this differs from the book. In the book, there's actually multiple monsters. There's multiple mud monsters, not one. And they pull up, and Courtney actually is scared. They actually succeed. She screams and screams and screams, and they all scream. They're all terrified, and they all run out. And then actually, even though they scared Courtney, it actually kind of helps her. Because now she's like, I knew it. Monsters were real all along, and I have the proof. So it's kind of like a hollow victory in the book. And they're like, yeah, well, I guess we got one over. Maybe we could do it again, but not now. Because they're too scared to go back.
I wonder why they changed. Why do you think they changed it?
I'm not sure. there are many Goosebumps episodes that changed drastically from the book. Maybe it was a budget thing, maybe it was a time thing, or maybe they just didn't think that would work for an episode. Instead, what happens in the episode is she turns around, she sees that there's a monster, and instead of getting scared, she first turns around and says, "You are right." And then she turns back around and he's like, "Whoa," and she's like, "Don't interrupt."
Oh.
He's like, "I'm talking." I was like, we need to address your aggressive nature. And just this montage of her talking and talking and talking to this thing, and this thing's just standing there taking it all in. He's like so confused, and then
doesn't he dry up? He dries up or something.
yeah,
Oh my
talks
God,
to him.
this is coming back.
He talks to him so long that the sun comes out, and he's just, and it's so funny because he's stuck in a position like this where he's like, this monster, this mindless ghoul just is standing there listening to all this, and he like crosses his arms like he's just kind of like, huh. And then the sun comes out and he dries up, and she's still talking to him. She's still talking, and then she's like, "Are you even listening to me?" And he's just stuck. And it's really funny too, because during the whole montage is like the boys are in the background, and they're just there. They're sitting down at one point. They're just kind of like, and then they're like pacing back and forth. It's so funny. And then the episode ends. So they lost. Their final attempt went kaput. Not only did they get scared instead of her, but she completely embarrassed them. And now there's news crew and there's reporters, and she's like, now she's even more popular than ever because she's given all these she's gonna like go talk to the mayor. she's given all these interviews, and then she's turning around and being like, I felt it was my duty to save these two helpless boys. It's like, I'll never forget the terrified look on their faces. So it's like one last, don't mess with me because I got you. Just to stick it to them. And then they all leave, and then the rain starts coming down again. So once they've all left, the Hat and Eddie, they're just sitting there, they're just defeated. They're like, what are we going to do, man? I was like, this is not fair. It's just not fair. But it's raining, so the monster gets back up, and the episode ends. He puts his hand on their shoulder, and then freeze frame. That's how it ends. That was
the end of the episode. That was the last shot. Literally,
the last episode. Yeah, he's like,
yeah.
I gotta tell you, man, life's not fair. And then the monster puts his hand on his shoulder, and he's like, "Oh, thanks, man." They're like, "Ah."
Hey, even the mud monster was like,
Yeah, he's like,
it's all good. Like,
yeah, what do you feel like maybe he was just being a bro in that moment? He's just like, I feel you, man. And then they're like, oh no.
I see what you've been dealing with, guys. Oh dang.
Yeah. It's just like he becomes the unofficial third member of their crew.
He did. He was defeated too. Like, you know what I mean? So
yeah, you want to talk about hidden messages. There's your hidden message.
Courtney was a champ.
So that's the episode.
Only character that won in that whole, that you literally every time you won, and even right at the end, you're like, oh well, I'm going to be going to meet the man now, and I'm going to be super famous, and
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the thing. Is like different from the book, but only in a certain way, because in both sense she kind of wins. She's always going to come up. People like that are always going to kind of come up on top in the end. But this is a situation that's very cynical. It's just like, you can't win. You can't win. There's no way.
Exactly.
So it's like, why do you even bother? Now, this episode, we've obviously today have gone into a lot of very deep meanings with this episode. Now that we've kind of gone through it all, though, I gotta say it's not an episode that I would say is in my top 10. But I really appreciate it for trying to be a little more. Is
it in your top 30? Is it in the top 50? Like,
it's. I would say it's in my top 25.
Oh crap! Okay, I'll take it.
It's in my top 10. It's in my top 10. Like short episodes, because you got you got like two-parters, and then you've got like the short like 20-minute
Like
episodes.
standalone.
Definitely in my top 10 of those, 100%. Because like one thing we've noticed with the Goosebumps series is that whenever they took a book and did a two-parter, it's almost like they felt like the budget was almost like bigger or more like they spent more time working on that specific episode when it was like a two-parter. Like, oh, this is a special one. You know what I mean? Like Isaiah says all the time, like, this is a special episode. We had to make it 40 minutes long, not 20. You know, like even though the books were all like relatively the same length. So, but there are some short episodes like this one I consider one of the better short episodes, and then like Revenge of the Law Gnomes a really good one. I looked at me too. Yeah, so they're all in my top 10 of the short episodes, Isaiah.
No pressure to say that.
I just want to say, I was going to say, no offense.
No, I have none taken. Absolutely none.
No, I want to ask you really quick. So obviously, as we said, you had a really big scene with the mud monster just talking his ears off. But I'm curious, what was your reaction to the look of the mud monster in the episode? Like, when was the first time do you remember the first time you really got to get a look at it?
Yeah, the one thing that I honestly just popped into my head as you were talking was I believe they doused this, I believe it was a gentleman.
Yeah.
With McDonald's milkshake. So there was like a sweet smell to him.
Yeah, I noticed that, like, especially when she's like talking to him, you can see there's like a lot of stuff dripping from his face.
I had not thought about that until I was like, that's still in there.
That's a McDonald's. You said that's McDonald's milkshake.
It was a McDonald's milkshake. Yeah. I don't.
It looks like it.
That's wild.
I can't.
It looks like it. Oh my god! The whole time though, I would have been like.
So.
I don't know if it's like a long day on. I don't know if you would. Do you want to get sick? I'm not sure. I see it. The movie magic. Like, sometimes when you find out those things, it sort of takes it away. But
that's the thing too. Is like you gotta.
Actually, I think that's hilarious.
That is.
We had Ron Stefanik on here who made the suit and everything, and from my understanding, if I remember right, the guy in the suit was a wrestler who they've used before for other things because of how tall and big he was.
Wait, for my episode, he was a wrestler?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep. From my understanding, like the guy in the suit was a wrestler.
Okay.
I can't remember his name though. I'll have to look that up again.
Mm-hmm.
But he never mentioned ice cream though, being a McDonald's milkshake thing jumped on there.
Like,
he just said the suit didn't last long after that episode. Like it just deteriorated like crazy because of all the stuff they had to put on it.
Was it Gary Robbins?
That it's a milkshake is pretty hilarious.
Was it Gary Robbins?
I think so.
If that's what it says,
right. That's what it says.
I would assume that.
Canadian actor, professional wrestler Gary Robbins. He did unfortunately pass away in 2013. But he played the Mud Monster. He was in movies like he was in Wrong Turn. He was in Short Circuit 2, In the Mouth of Madness, The Love Guru, movies like that. So, yeah, he was in The Love Guru. That's what it said right there.
Oh wow, that's crazy.
But it certainly makes sense for like when you have a monster like that, you need to have somebody who's big and hulking so it looks intimidating.
Yeah,
but yeah, I mean, obviously we could tell that, they splashed it with something to make it look gooey, but I never, ever would have guessed in a million years that it was a McDonald's milkshake. That is incredible.
On a budget.
Gotta
go get that.
I mean, you do what you can do. It's the same color. It's the same color.
Yeah.
So it makes sense.
Wow.
I always thought that the Mud Monster looked really cool. It's one of my favorite like monster costumes in the 90s TV series. I don't know if it was Gary Robbins doing the noises that the monster made, sort of the big booming like roars and stuff like that, but especially when he's running, it's like or it's very like ape-like almost in a sense.
It is.
Very. It's
Mhm.
almost like you'd probably have like a gorilla chasing after you. That's the kind of noises it's making. Um, but I always really liked it, but I can't get over
Was
that.
there any other episodes of Goosebumps that you auditioned for, or like maybe even got asked to like be a part of? Because I know some of the other stars even said like they went for like multiple different episodes. Some were in
I
multiple.
would imagine I probably did because I was in that little circuit. But nothing is coming to mind in terms of like what I mean, I wasn't following these books very closely as a kid. So I guess I wouldn't even know what they were. You know what I mean? I kind of like auditioned blindly, which was probably a bad idea, but I should have been more professional and done a bit more research before
I will say, there are a few actors from this episode that did go on to do other Goosebumps episodes. The actor of Hat played Chris in The House of No Return, which we talked about earlier.
Okay.
And the teacher who
Yeah.
gets scared by the snake is one of the men in black in Don't Go to Sleep.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Even
So,
even I didn't know that. Like I should know this, but even I didn't know that.
now, well, so you said that you kind of auditioned blindly. When you got this episode, did you get a chance to like read the script beforehand? What did you think that it was like an interesting episode from what you saw?
Yeah, I think any chance for me as a kid to get out of school would have been really, really up there. So I don't think it
Right
took
on.
much for me to be like, I don't want to go to school. Yeah, I didn't like the school I went to. So I would have obviously read the script, hopefully. Because as I said, one of my biggest fears, also getting way, way worse as I get older, is having to memorize like dialogue. I find it just really one of my biggest challenges. So that would have been something I would have had to have had. If I didn't have the script, I don't know I don't know how I would have been able to do that. So, but in terms of my memory, nothing is coming out at me right now in terms of even remembering when I got it. I don't know anything.
Totally fine.
So let me
I
ask
am
you,
useless.
do you have a memory that you do remember about the time spent on there that was like one of your favorites? Like, was it the fact that they made a milkshake dump on this mud monster, or
Did you get to see the milkshake dump?
a relationship you had there? Did they let you dump the milkshake on the mud monster?
No, I feel like I remember where we shot this. Like I remember the park we were in. So I've been to that park later in my life and been like, oh yeah, but didn't we shoot that here? Like, so I've gone for dog walks in that park.
Have you seen any mud monsters?
I hadn't thought, I mean, probably at night. So, talk about fears. Like I certainly, that's one of mine. I don't want to be walking alone in a park at night.
Yep.
But yeah, the thing I do remember is like what I probably sold it to me was like getting to touch all those creatures. That would have been like the coolest part, and also missing school, which is terrible. Stay in school, kids.
Hey, that's fine. You know,
Power.
like
Yeah.
anytime I could ditch school and go to the skate park, that was like the best day ever. So,
I know.
I mean,
it's terrible. It's
I'm not
terrible.
telling you kids out there that are watching this to do that, but you know,
No,
like,
no. The idea that I would sit in school and be like, when is this over? Like you're wishing your life away. It's just terrible. Like it's supposed to be learning, which is supposed to be awesome. I don't know why it has to be so.
That's what I tell my daughter too. She's like, "Oh, I can't wait for out of school." I'm like, "Yeah, you say that." It's like, I said that too.
Then you get into
Like,
adulthood and you wish you
Then you
were
get to
learning about
adulthood.
multiplication and fractions and whatnot. It was a hell of a lot
You're
easier
gonna miss
trying
those
to figure out
scholastic
how you're gonna pay your
books
bills this month.
oh yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Is that your
Did you
fear?
get to keep anything from the? Do you remember if they
I-
gave you anything? Like,
If I did keep something, I think it would have. Do you remember in Clueless they had those like fuzzy pens, and like that was like a big deal. I don't know if that at all resonates with you, but I think that I may have angled to keep a couple pens. I don't know.
Hey,
Wow,
you know what?
really?
I think that's better than what Kai kept. He decided to keep the socks. If I remember right, that's what he kept.
I often feel my socks and underwear. So I'm like, that would be disgusting for somebody else to use.
Yeah.
Like I'm doing you a favor.
Honestly, I'd be concerned if they did hand me down other actors' clothes.
No, that's right. So I'm like, I'm not going to give you like this just came fresh out of the box. I'm not. I'm not giving you my underwear.
Yeah, and I wouldn't want somebody else's clothes on my body either.
No.
I think that goes both ways.
Yeah. Another fear.
This is definitely a very rainy episode of Goosebumps. Was that actual rain? Was it like actually raining the day you shot, or was it like one of those?
No, they had. I remember that they had the rain machines for that.
Oh, wow.
I mean,
like a full on. Like, how big are those things?
They're like these long poles, and there's multiple of them, and it just depends on how many you have up. But I think for that particular sequence, they needed a lot of rain. So that was totally fake.
Wow.
Always curious. It's like you never know. But also when you're playing around with weather, you're like really constrained by time. So I'd honestly be more shocked if it really was raining that day.
So Goosebumps is kind of still in its height at the time that this episode aired. And I've heard some other actors kind of say that like after they did Goosebumps, because Goosebumps was so popular in the 90s, that they had a hard time going to the mall or to a skating rink or anything like that. Did you have a similar scenario to that?
No,
not
even for 2 seconds. No, no. No, I don't think anybody has ever come up to me about Goosebumps.
Except us.
Oh my gosh.
Except for you guys. Yeah, no, I absolutely not. No.
That's really interesting.
I don't know who said that. Who said that they had a hard time?
Well,
so
I know
Catherine Long
there's
was one of them.
Catherine Long's definitely she's probably the most well known of the kid actors.
Hers was the first, like, didn't it kind of launch the whole television series? And I do remember when that one had come out, and that one was a really big deal. Like that one was that was I think the best one, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
To many people's opinions, a lot of them remember that one pretty fondly, and it kind of goes back to what Isaiah said earlier, where it's a 2-parter, and because it was the first episode, I feel they definitely put more effort into that one because they needed it to be a success. But it sticks in a lot of people's minds because it came out around Halloween. It's a Halloween episode. It was the first episode, so it really kind of stuck with a lot of people. But besides Catherine, I mean, I think Eugene Lipinski has said he's had people come up and say, "Hey, aren't you Mr. Mortman?" He's like, "Yes." And Kai has said in our interview with him that over the years he's had more people send him fan mail or come up to him about Goosebumps than anything else he's ever done.
In 30 years he's acted
like that.
And most fan mail has been Goosebumps related, and he's been in a lot of stuff.
No way.
So it really surprises me that you haven't had anybody, because I mean, honestly, like, you know, You Can't Scare Me is I think it's a good episode, and while, you know, it's not like, say, Haunted Mask quality, because again, it was a 20-minute episode compared to a 2-parter. Like we said, for some reason they always gave those 2-parters a little extra love. Your character was still very memorable. I mean, she was like, you know, like you said, you loved or hated her, but either way, I mean, the role portrayed of her character sticks out in that episode as much as the mud monster at the end
You're
does.
so sweet. I just I couldn't rewatch this because I'm so afraid of how bad my acting is. But I just have to keep being kind to myself because I'm like, I was 11. I was 11. I didn't murder anybody. I was 11. I was 11. Like I keep sort of saying that out loud just to make myself feel better.
It was very memorable.
But thank you. You're very, very sweet.
Like Nick said, it was your character specifically. Like I don't know if you're aware, but there's actually been some fan art of your character from the episode. Actual fan art. And generally those when there's a character that someone really remembers, they will do a lot of different fan art and things like that. So I've seen quite a few things over the years. And like I said, I consider this one of the best of the shorter episodes for sure. Like it's like one of the top 10 best of the short ones. This is an episode I've been fond of because I remember watching this one on TV when I was a kid. Because obviously Nick got to live Goosebumps in 95, 96, 97, 98, like even in 98 when it was declining. For me, I started in 99. So I was catching all the reruns of Goosebumps, and this was one of the first episodes that I'd seen because they were just sort of airing them all. And I remember it was two of the first episode that aired was Piano Lessons Can Be Murder, and then it was You Can't Scare Me. Those were like back to back that were airing on TV at the time. And I remember this one so well, like the chase scene, like Isaiah said, that one really stuck in my mind, and it still does. Goosebumps did that very well, the chase scenes. Yes.
Cheers.
Yeah, they did.
Going back to what you said about art, I don't know if this is art specifically of the episode, but this is always a piece that I've seen around on Google whenever I looked up Goosebumps as a whole, even. But we got this piece of art right here.
That's you.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that's the episode.
Yeah,
100%.
That's so good.
Oh yeah, the outfit, the binoculars.
Yeah.
So
no, I love that. That's what I mean. Yeah, there's like.
I could be wrong, but we have like an official artist for our YouTube channel, Adam Ledford, and I think he's done something too. I'll have to see. Usually, he waits until the episode comes out so he can promote it. He'll do artwork for the person who came out there. Like, I know I've got something here. Actually, just to give you an example. And I actually stopped to mail this off, but he normally likes to do artwork of certain individuals. And like, I don't know if you ever got to meet Ron Stefanik, who was the lead special effects creator for the Goosebumps show, him and his team.
So he would have designed the mud monster.
Oh,
but
like, he does little art pieces and stuff like that.
Very cool. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he's done, like I said, one for everybody who we've had on the show on our episode so far. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's already got one started for You Can't Scare Me. So I'll be sure to send that over.
That would be awesome.
Once he has that, because he's a very good artist. And yeah, there's actually quite a bit of fan art. You Can't Scare Me has gotten a lot of recognition over time. A lot of the 90s merch had the mud monster on it. Even lately, Trick or Treat Studios is doing a mud monster figure and a mask.
Cool.
It's getting a lot more love here lately because of the resurgence of kind of like nostalgia, because Goosebumps books have already hit 30 years, but next year is the 30th anniversary of the TV show. Yeah, I know.
Weird. That's so weird.
If I didn't feel old enough,
I don't know. That's so bizarre. Yeah, that's so insane to me.
I guess one final question. So I know that you've said you probably will never rewatch the episode.
No, I just was like, I don't think this is a good idea. I said I'd rather go into it just using this old weird thing. Yeah.
So would you let your daughter watch it though? Like, that's kind of an interesting thing I found out with some of the people we talked to. They kind of let their kids watch it, but I don't know if they actually watch it with them at the same time.
So I have tried to show her some stuff, and she is like, really creeped out by it. Like in a really weird way. She has this very strange adverse reaction to me. Like she just thinks it's weird. And like seeing her, I guess her mom like shrunken into like a little itty bitty kid. Like she finds it super bizarre. And I'm like, would you have been friends with her? Like I ask her that. But she could be like less interested and more. That's her fear, I guess. She finds it super creepy. So I'm like, no, I can't. She doesn't think it's cool. She thinks it's weird. Even when I was pregnant with her, I did a TV show, and you could really see that I'm pregnant. It wasn't even in the like scripted, and she just thought it was like so strange. I'm like, don't ever show me that again. So I was like, come on. I was like, I was cool once. Yeah, she was doesn't care.
Well, and that's funny you say that, because I definitely feel that. Like my daughter's 14, she'll be 15 soon. So I definitely feel that. And I'm not even like an actor or anything, but it's like, we had Amos Crawley on, same thing. He was in like Billy Madison. So outside of Goosebumps, he's done a lot of really good stuff. And he was in a very popular episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark as well. So he's done some good stuff. And same thing, or he's like, my kids are not impressed. They don't care.
No. It's more, but it's beyond impressed. It's like she's genuinely creeped out by seeing me.
That is the first time I've ever heard that.
I gotta probably talk to a therapist. I guess I kind of see that.
What I was going to ask,
your kids don't want to like, they can't imagine you being young for some reason. Like, like I see photos of my parents. I go, oh wow, like when I see them when they're really young, but I'm like, were you really that young though? Like, you know what I mean? I can't ever imagine seeing you like as a kid. You know what I mean? Like you were born into the world as an adult. That's how we look at our parents. Like you were born as an adult. You were never a kid. That's what that's kind of the, what you sort of
came out with a 401k.
Yeah. One of my favorite bands of all time is the Rolling Stones. And it's funny because my mum was pregnant with me when they went to see the Rolling Stones, like in 1990. It would have been in 95, like, because I think that was early in 95. And then sure enough, that became one of my favorite bands. And they're like, funny story. And I'm like, what? And they're like, yeah, you were like 8 months when we saw the Rolling Stones. And so you were probably in there just, doing the rooster.
That's not a bad first concert. I think that's a really, really cool first concert.
Some would certainly say so.
Yeah.
No, what I was actually going to ask was something similar. It was, what did you get a chance to see the episode when it premiered, and just see yourself on TV and be like, wow, like there I am in an episode? Like, did you have that opportunity?
I would have imagined I did, but I also had a weird reaction to it. It's healthy for me to see things. I just realized like it actually, you shouldn't look at yourself as much as actors have to look at themselves. It's really unhealthy. So oftentimes when you're doing a job, you have to go to a recording studio and fix dialogue and things where there's noise that has kind of interrupted the show. Like let's say an airplane has kind of come over the audio. You have to re-record yourself in scenes often. And so that's usually where I see a lot of my work. And it's usually a big old disappointment. So it's not healthy for my mental health. But I would imagine I did probably see it when I was little.
Yeah. No, for a while I had the same thing. It's like whenever I would record something, I'm going to be like, well, I'm never going to see that again because I don't want to.
Yeah.
Aww.
And
I feel the exact same way.
And still kind of am now. So, but that is going to do it for this week's episode of the Goosebumps Crew Podcast. Charlotte, I want to thank you so much for coming on and talking some Goosebumps with you. We really appreciate you having you on.
Oh, thanks for even wanting to talk to me. That's like just really so cool. Thank you.
Absolutely. Nope. Anytime. And if you ever want to come back, talk more Goosebumps with us, we'd be glad to have you. So thank you again.
Awesome.
And that is going to do it for today. Make sure, as always, you follow Bjorn and Nick, Goosebumps Sausage Fan, and Shaolin on their respective YouTubes and social medias. And make sure you subscribe to the Goosebumps Crew podcast on YouTube. Leave a like and comment. Follow us on our audio platforms and follow the Goosebumps Crew on social media. All of those links are going to be in the description below. We're going to have a brand new episode of the podcast for you next week. But until then, this has been the Goosebumps Crew podcast. From all of us here, we want to wish you all to take care, stay safe, and have a very scary day.